So let's take a few questions from the reporters, and I always like to start with the local reporters first, and then we'll do the national folks if we got time afterwards.
Senator Vance, first of all, congratulations on last night's debate.
Thank you.
I did get a chance to speak to some voters here before you stepped on stage. I spoke to Jeffrey and Bert, and they said that they loved how the debate was civil and policy-focused. But then I also got some opportunity to speak to voters outside of the event, and I got a question from Robert from Pontiac, and it's a two-part question. I hope you can answer it.
Sure.
So the first part is, with issues where Americans are divided, if elected as the next vice president, how will you bring folks together, especially from the other party? And if there is an issue you disagree with Donald Trump, how will you make your voice heard for the people?
Well, so and you said the person who asked that question is named Robert?
Correct.
So my message to Robert on the first question is, look, I think that the reason this country feels so divided is because of failed leadership and nothing else. You talk to, and look, I genuinely believe this. With a lot of folks who are going to vote against me and Donald Trump, there are a lot of people out there who are fundamentally good human beings, but the leadership of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, is an absolute disgrace. And here's the way, again, why do we have so much division? And why do we have so much rancor in this country's political debate? It's because Kamala Harris and her allies are trying to silence the American people rather than engage with them. When you try to censor your fellow citizens, when you try to shut them up, you breed division and hatred. Donald Trump and I are going to bring this country back together by encouraging the free exchange of ideas and this idea that our leaders ought to persuade their fellow citizens, not try to shut them up, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do. Open this country up. Open up the dialogue and open up the debate, and that is how you bring American citizens back together in these divided times. But on the second question about what do you do when you disagree with Donald Trump, the answer is, first of all, Donald Trump is at the top of the Republican ticket. He will be the next president of the United States. I've got two responsibilities. The first is to support the president in enacting an agenda that I believe is going to lead to rising take-home pay and lower inflation for American citizens. That's number one. But of course, if I disagree with the president, it is my responsibility to talk to him about it and to offer honest counsel in private. And one of the things that I love about Donald Trump is that he takes advice and feedback from everybody. As much as, you know, it's funny when the president, the only conversation that he and I ever had about whether I might become his vice presidential nominee was the Saturday before the convention. If you remember, that was the Saturday where he was shot in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I saw him that morning in Florida. We ended our conversation. He hopped in a plane and flew to Pennsylvania, where, of course, an assassin nearly took his life. And you know what the president told me? He said that he talked to everybody about who his vice presidential nominee should be. And I think that's one of the great things is he's willing to take feedback. Of course, he makes the final decision, but he's willing to take inputs from everybody. And he even said that he was talking to the Mar-a-Lago gardener about who the vice presidential nominee should be. And I said, well, sir, what the hell did the Mar-a-Lago gardener say? Because this affects my life. I'm very curious what these people you're talking to are saying about this very important decision. But I think that it's one of the great things about his leadership style is he is in charge, he is in command, but he makes decisions after getting as much information as possible, and that's how the country should be led. You know, it actually raised an important question, you know, Robert, and I know, of course, the journalist who's asking this question. Look, one of the things that people in D.C. say about Kamala Harris, and it's Democrats that say this, it's people she served with in the Senate, and it's also Republicans. And, of course, they say this in private, but they'll say Kamala Harris is very insecure. She doesn't like to be challenged. If you don't like to be challenged and you don't like to engage in open debate, you should be nowhere near the Oval Office of the United States of America. Next question.
Thank you. Charlie Langton from Fox News, WLBJ here.
Hey, Charlie.
I talked to a lot of people here they also said you were very cordial last night in the debate, and the message got through. But compare your style to Donald Trump's style, where he was a little aggressive. Do you think that Donald Trump's message sometimes is lost because of his aggressive style?
No, Charlie, look, I think, first of all, there is a media caricature out there of Donald Trump that is so different from the man that I've come to know. And I think that, when he called me last night, you know what he said? He asked me how my wife was doing. And he said, you just had a hell of a debate. I'm sure that you were nervous. You had every right to be nervous, but go and have a nice meal with your wife and go and enjoy this moment. Like, that's the Donald Trump that I know. People say, now look, the other thing I love about Donald Trump, and I think it's true of all of us, we can be so devoted to and so grateful to this country and its incredible opportunities, but then also be kind of pissed off that the leadership is failing this great nation. There's no there's no tension in saying, on the one hand, we've got the greatest country in the world, and on the other hand, Kamala Harris is doing everything she can to screw it up. And I love that Donald Trump can do both of those things at the same time. He can go out there and talk to the American people and be warm and engaged. He can talk to a normal American citizen about their struggles in paying for groceries and housing under Kamala Harris's policies. And then he can go on a debate stage and tell Kamala Harris that she ought to stop screwing up and she ought to stop talking about solving the country's problems. She ought to go and actually do it. That's the kind of president we need. That's the kind of leader that we need. And I think his message gets through. Thank you. Next question.
Hey, Senator. Craig Mauger from the Detroit News newspaper here. You were talking about your opposition to EV mandates. My question is, do you think the government should have any role in incentivizing, providing financial assistance to battery plants, to electric vehicle plants? Michigan is poised to benefit from some of these investments. Will you allow those to go forward? Will you try to interfere with those? Thank you.
Well, look, I think there's certainly a role, and I believe this, I know Donald Trump believes this, in encouraging innovation, but there's a difference between promoting innovation and sending hundreds of billions of dollars to favored industries that make their products in China. These are two very, very different things. And here's the problem with a lot of these EV mandates is that this money was supposed to go to American workers, but Kamala Harris's IRS found every way possible to allow that EV subsidy to go to manufacturers in China and not in the United States of America. And here's the other problem with it. It's not just auto jobs that we're worried about here. Think about all the people who make carburetors. Think about all the people who make transmissions. There's an entire supply chain in the auto industry that China dominates when it comes to EVs and America dominates when it comes to gas-powered cars. So before we go and subsidize the EV industry, let's open up the American supply chain for that industry so that American workers and American consumers benefit. All of the minerals, all of the rare earth materials, a lot of the battery technology, a lot of the supply chain for these electric vehicles is made in China. And with the one hand, Kamala Harris wants to make it harder to build that supply chain in the United States of America. And with the other hand, she wants to send money to an industry that's built in China. It's disgraceful, and we got to stop doing it. Invest in American workers, not in Chinese workers and Chinese firms. And I know we unfortunately have to go to our next stop in the great state of Michigan. So I'll take one more question, and then I'll offer a final observation. Then we'll hit the road.
Hi, Senator. Will Jones from Local 4.
Hey, Will.
I spoke with some elected officials or election officials last week about their concern about people who are trying to undermine our elections. Why didn't you answer the question last night during the debate about who won the 2020 presidential election?
Well, look, here's the simple reason. The media is obsessed with talking about the election of 4 years ago. I'm focused on the election of 33 days from now because I want to throw Kamala Harris out of office and get back to common sense economic policies. But I also think you can believe that America needs to have secure and free elections, but also talk about the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, Democrats in the U.S. Congress blocked a piece of legislation that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. If you believe in American democracy, if you believe in our constitutional republic, you should be trying to strengthen American election integrity and not weaken it. So we're going to talk about election integrity because I believe that every vote ought to count, but only the legally cast votes, and that's why we fight for election integrity, and that's why we care so much about it. Now, this actually leads me into my next point, because I want to talk about, look, Democrats, whether they agree with what Donald Trump and I say about some of the criticisms we have, for example, I think that we make it way too easy for people to fraudulently vote in this country, okay? I think that we should have passed the SAVE Act that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. Apparently, Kamala Harris disagrees because she fought that legislation every step of the way. But the reason why Kamala Harris should actually sign on with our pro-election integrity efforts, things like common sense voter ID, is because it gives the American people confidence in the most important thing that we do when it comes to our government, which is voting. I want every American to have confidence. And by the way, to all of you listening out there, I believe that we are going to have the safest and most secure election in 2024 that we've had because the RNC is fighting for election integrity in a way that it frankly wasn't 4 years ago. So get out there. So I'd encourage folks, get out there and vote. And this brings me to swampthevote.com. And I want to make sure I got this right here. It's swampthevote.com. Go to swampthevote.com. Check your registration. Check your polling location. It'll give you some good information about how to vote and also how to volunteer. Because, one of the things that we're trying to do to ensure common sense election integrity is to promote more poll watchers. We've got more poll watchers in the Republican Party today than we had 4 years ago. If you're interested in helping us out and making sure that every legally cast ballot counts, then you can go to Swamp the Vote and help figure out how to get involved in those efforts. We believe in election integrity. I know all of you do, but election integrity only happens if all of us fight for it. But I got to be honest with you, I think that we're in a better shape in 2024 than we have been in a long time. We've done a lot to make our elections more secure, and what we've got to do, my friends, is get out there and vote. Never give in to the despair that your voice doesn't matter. We've got all kinds of ways to vote. You can vote early. You can vote by mail. You can vote on election day. Look, I don't love that we have election season in this country instead of election day, but it is what it is, and we've got to play by the rules that we've been given. And if we play by those rules over the next 33 days, we are going to win. We are going to send Donald Trump back to the White House, and we're going to save the American dream for all of our citizens. But let me say one final thing here. And I want to point out a couple of people that I didn't mention in the top, but first of all, you guys have got a great Republican chair in the state of Michigan, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, please wave and say hello. We've got an old friend of mine from before either of us were involved in politics, the great Congressman John James. Where's John at? I know he's around here somewhere. John's got a beautiful family, and he's been a great advocate for the state of Michigan. I hope you guys reelect him, and I believe that you will. But let me just say this final thing before we got to hit the road. I have learned over the last 8 weeks more about this country than I could have possibly hoped to learn. And I mentioned this last night, but the thing that has affected me the most is all of the people who come up to me, and some of them are struggling to put food on the table, and they have the generosity of spirit to ask me how I'm doing, or to tell me that they're praying for my wife and kids. And it makes me realize that we have got the greatest country in the world. So I don't want us to ever get so frustrated with our leadership that we forget that we've got the best people, the best jobs, the best workers, the best natural resources. The only thing that I believe is broken about this country is the failed generation of leadership of people like Kamala Harris. So you have not just an important opportunity, we all have an important responsibility to return the people's government back to the American people, to have a president who puts the interests of America's citizens first, to close the border, bring down the cost of groceries, make housing more affordable again, and to make sure that the American people have a government that serves and fights for them. 33 days, let's get to work and make it happen. God bless you all, and thanks for having me.